is with a great pleasure and honor, I would like to shift to the next session. And we are going, as I said, we have been, as an institute, CAREC Institute, we've been privileged to have a venue here at this wonderful university in Almaty at this wonderful time. And one of our hostess, Dr. Xiaotong Zhang, Zhang Xiaotong, will provide a lecture. So the plan is probably for like about 40 minutes, something like that, 45 minutes, and then we'll have a brief session, or if you have any questions or comments on what we're going to hear for 15-20 minutes. So let me briefly introduce you Zhang Xiaotong, who is a professor in the Department of Political Science and International Relations at this in KIMEP, and he actually joined KIMEP recently, January 2024 this year, and this is his first experience living in Kazakhstan. He has served as, and he's the director of China and Central Asia Studies Center, one of the rarest, centers on Chinese economy in Kazakhstan. He's also the editor-in-chief of the Economic Diplomacy Journal. Previously, he was a full professor at the Institute of Belt and Road Initiative and Global Governance at Fudan University, starting in August 2020. From 2012 to 2020, he was a full professor at the School of Political Science and Public Administration, also in Wuhan University. During this time, he also served as the executive director of the Wuhan University Center for Economic Diplomacy and continues to chair its academic committee. Before his academic tenure, Dr. Xiaotong Zhang was deputy director of the U.S. desk at the Chinese Ministry of Commerce from 20 to 2012 and trade attaché at the Chinese mission to the European Union in Brussels. He earned his PhD in political science from Université Libre de Bruxelles, excuse my French, in Belgium. Was it in French?
Yes.
Okay. Do you mind if you speak in English?
I will not speak in French.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Kat. It's a really great pleasure here to give my contribution, academic contribution, since I'm a political scientist. So I'm always wondering how political science, how international relations or international political economy can contribute to the discussion at the CAREC Institute annual conference. So today I'm going to talk about geography, especially the geography of prosperity development for the CAREC region, but mainly from the perspective of international relations. So my talk will start from two specific puzzles. So I explain to you what is my specific puzzle about economic growth at CAREC region. Then throughout my presentation, I will explain to you how what is my understanding of geographies of the CAREC region. So the puzzle one is how the CAREC region have managed to achieve sustained, robust economic growth in the past 10 years. So here is a table provided by CAREC Institute, the quarterly economic monitoring report. So surprisingly, I have seen for the past 10 years, the CAREC region has achieved sustained, robust economic growth. The growth, you can see 2015 to 2019, it was 4.5%. And then the first quarter of this year, the CAREC region the first quarter economic growth averaged 5.8%. And if you look at the specific CAREC countries, except Afghanistan, which we have not been able to get data for the past 2 years, for the rest of CAREC countries, they basically have achieved economic growth, robust economic growth, except Pakistan last year and the first quarter of this year. So basically, you can see in Kazakhstan, 5.1%, and Kyrgyzstan, 6.2% last year, Mongolia, 7%, Tajikistan 8.3%, Turkmenistan 6.3%, and Uzbekistan 6%. And the first quarter of this year, you see 8%, 7.8%. So it's actually a quite surprisingly good picture. I know there might be some bubble in the specific statistics, but generally speaking, the whole CAREC region registered a robust economic growth. So the question, my puzzle is how and why? So first, I want to ask how the CAREC region can manage to achieve economic growth, robust economic growth, against harsh weather conditions, against not ideal natural geography. So if you look at the Google map of the CAREC region, you can see basically the CAREC region are the yellowish part, the light colored part of the Euro-Asian continent. So you can see here in Mongolia, there are desert, steppe. In the northwest part of China, in Xinjiang, it's also desert. And in Kazakhstan, you have steppe and desert. And Uzbekistan, except the Fergana Valley and the part near Tashkent, you have large area of desert. And also Turkmenistan and Afghanistan and part of Pakistan. So you don't see many green areas. So what does that mean? That means there are very difficult climate conditions, weather conditions in the CAREC region. So basically, this is the CAREC region natural geography, the weather conditions. Much of the CAREC region experienced the so-called continental climate, which is characterized by large seasonal temperature variations with very hot summers and very cold winters. And Kazakhstan is a very good example where you can experience very hot summers. I mean, even in Almaty, which is supposed to be a moderate weather area, but you still have very hot summer. And in winter, it could be -25, right? So this continental climate is especially true for landlocked areas, far from the moderating influence of large bodies of water. And the second feature of natural geography of CAREC region is this land is very dry. It's arid and semi-arid conditions. So large parts of this region, particularly in Central Asia, are arid or semi-arid areas. That is not ideal for agriculture. That means very short growing seasons. And sometimes you experience extreme weather events. So how the CAREC region can achieve economic growth, robust economic growth against difficult weather. And more than difficult weather, the CAREC region have difficult geopolitics. If you look at this map, this is a political geography of CAREC region. So for the past 30 years, CAREC region has been going through a very challenging geopolitical reorganization. So this is a Soviet Union time map. So you can see the CAREC region are largely the former Soviet Union republics. And also there was a war between USSR and Afghanistan. Since 1991, so the 5 Central Asian countries within a very short period of time have achieved their independence. So in other words, Central Asia are the youngest region, having the youngest group of countries, right? That means nation building, state building, everything started from scratch. And also you have to manage your relations with your neighbors. So in other words, you are going through a very difficult geopolitical reorganization. So, I mean, as a political scientist, I always think from this kind of perspective. Gosh, it's very difficult actually. First, to get independence. Secondly, to make sure that you have very effective government. Thirdly, you need to put in place an effective market economy and for achieving robust economic growth. I mean, everything you need to start from scratch, right? So it's not very easy. So my puzzle, first puzzle is how the CAREC region achieved sustained robust economic growth against the difficult weather and geopolitics. So I tried to search online and I used ChatGPT. And guess what? That ChatGPT gave me a very good answer. So basically the answer is the robust economic growth in the CAREC region during the first quarter of 2024 can be attributed to a very important factor. Basically, the factor is CAREC program, right? So CAREC program helps achieve robust economic growth. You see the key among the key factors was an increase in trade and economic cooperation facilitated by the CAREC region. CAREC program's focus on enhancing regional connectivity and infrastructure. Additionally, there was emphasis on integrating modern technologies across various sectors, which helped boost productivity and efficiency across the region. So I think that everybody in this room should be proud of yourselves, especially the CAREC staff, right? So, but I think that ChatGPT also largely searched the ADB website. So that's why this ChatGPT gives this answer. For sure that CAREC program plays a very important role. But we also have to admit there are some new factors that go beyond this ChatGPT answer. For example, we are seeing some most recent developments. After the Russia-Ukrainian war, we see increased remittances from Russia, people working in Russia. I mean, basically people from Central Asian countries working in Russia now send more remittances because Russia's military mobilization, strong demand of labor. So we see increased remittances from Russia back to Central Asian countries, like countries in Kyrgyzstan. And that helps increase domestic demands in some CAREC countries. And also here in Kazakhstan, we have witnessed some investments, some capital flow diverted from Russia into Kazakhstan, right? And into other Central Asian countries. A lot of money flowing from China to Central Asian countries. And also we're witnessing the supply chain is being rerouted. The trade has been rerouted. We see a lot of increase of trade between and among CAREC countries, right? So how to explain this? How to explain? So we really look for new answers that could result from a changing global and regional dynamics. So here I have a further puzzle. So I have one puzzle one, and I have a second puzzle, which is how can the CAREC region achieve robust economic growth when wars or threats of war are occurring within and around the CAREC region, right? Afghanistan was just ended 3 years ago, right? Afghanistan is a member of the CAREC region. And we see territorial disputes between Azerbaijan and Armenia. Azerbaijan is a member of the CAREC region. We see Israel-Hamas war, which is not far away from CAREC region, right? Not far away. It's very close, actually. And the US-China tensions in every aspect, especially on Taiwan issue. So East Asia, I mean, and China is a CAREC member, right? So East Asia actually is now on the brink of a war. You can see this. It's pretty scary, actually, the picture. So we probably are on the path towards the next great war with a big question mark. So against such harsh geopolitical conditions, how the CAREC region achieve robust economic growth? You probably think that, oh, these wars, threats, wars are far away from CAREC region. No, they're very close. They're either within or at the doorstep. And what does that mean for CAREC economic growth? So I have two puzzles and I need answers. So I give you answers from the perspective of political science and international relations. Okay, so again, geography, geopolitics. So for the past 20 years, you can see all the major geopolitical confrontations, wars are happening in 7 enclosed seas or semi-enclosed seas in the Euro-Asian continent, right? Here you see the Baltic Sea, Russia, NATO military standoff. And here you see Israel-Hamas war. And here is the Red Sea. And here, I think that Iran is really sitting on the time bomb. We are waiting for how Iran would respond after their military leader was killed by America, after the Hamas political leader was killed, right? In Tehran. So 1, 2, 3, oh, and here, don't forget Black Sea, you have Ukrainian, Russia war, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 enclosed and semi-enclosed seas to the west end of the CAREC region. And here to the east end of the CAREC region. So you can see this is another big enclosed sea, what I would call it Northeast Asia, Mediterranean Sea, because really it's a round-shaped sea, enclosed sea, and starting from Sea of Okhotsk, and then move forward to Sea of Japan, with Korea Peninsula in the center of this Northeast Asia Sea and East China Sea, which ends here in Taiwan. Okay, so you can see here because of Korean Peninsular disputes or nuclear issue. So this region is actually pretty tough region, especially when Russia newly signed a military alliance with the DPRK, when China and Russia have established strategic partnership without upper limits 1 week before Russia's invasion in Ukraine, and because China and the DPRK still maintain a military alliance, which was signed in 1961. So you can see a potential military bloc. I hope it will not be formed, but there's a possibility, China, Russia, DPRK. And don't forget, we have US, Japan, and South Korea also establishing a quasi-military alliance, or maybe it's already military alliance. They have summit, they have unified military drills. So you can see there are DPRK China, Russia versus US, Japan, South Korea. Does that ring a bell? Right, you see the East Asia is on the brink of war, and Central Eastern Europe also already in the war, actually. So are they far away from CAREC region? Right. And also South China Sea, you know, starting from Taiwan all the way through Southeast Asian countries. You have here, you have Malacca Strait. You have Philippines, China-Philippines have a territorial dispute about the scope, about who has which part of South China Sea. So altogether, you have 5 + 2, 7 enclosed or semi-enclosed seas around the CAREC region. See, CAREC region is not far away from wars or threats of wars. So that's the geography of CAREC region. So how to achieve geographic prosperity for the CAREC region, and what this geopolitical situation mean for CAREC region. And also I want to emphasize, now we are going through a Red Sea crisis, and what does that mean for CAREC region? So a lot of, I think most international shipping companies now already rerouting their trading route, which originally the so-called Suez route has been shifted to the Cape route. So Shanghai originally sent goods to Rotterdam or to New York, they go through Malacca Strait, then go through Red Sea and Suez Canal and into Europe, right? So that route called the Suez route, 10,600 nautical miles. It takes 27 days. If you want to go further across the Atlantic Ocean into New York, this route is called also Suez route. It's 12,400 nautical miles. It takes 32 days. And look at what is happening now. So most shipping companies have to divert their routes from Suez route to Cape route. And that means ships from Shanghai go through Malacca Strait, go all the way southward across the Indian Ocean, then Cape of Good Hope, bypass Cape of Good Hope, go further north, and then into Rotterdam. And this Cape route takes 35 days. That means 8 days more than the traditional Suez route. And from Cape into New York, the Cape route takes 38 days. So 6 days more than the traditional Suez route between Shanghai and New York. So if you are a shipping company, you ask yourself whether you want to pay 20, 30% more for choosing Cape route, or you prefer an alternative route when the Suez route is being blocked. So you think about other alternative routes. So you will start to think about land-based routes. And traditionally, we go through Russia, or first through Kazakhstan, then into Russia, then into Poland, Belarus, Poland, and into Baltic states or into the Western European countries. But now, because of Russia-Ukrainian war, so people now going through CAREC region. So that means rerouting of the supply chains. So what does CAREC mean for China after 2022, after the end of COVID, after the Russia-Ukrainian war? So traditionally, for the BRI, you have 6 major economic corridors. So 2 corridors go into Southeast Asia and South Asia. So number 4, China, Indo-China Peninsula, and second route is Bangladesh, China, India, Myanmar route. This route works well because China relationship with ASEAN is good. And this route does not work very well because China-India relationship is going through difficulties, even though most recently there are some recovery, but still relationship between China and India are sometimes quite tense because of the border dispute along this line, the southwest part of China and Himalaya mountains. So that means China's Belt and Road is now relying on other 3 corridors. And this corridor used to be the most important one, China, Mongolia, Russia. Now it's being changed. So China focuses more and more on 2, 3, 4. So first, China-Pakistan, CPEC. China is giving more and more strategic geopolitical importance to this corridor. And secondly, China gives more importance to the new Eurasia land bridge, which cuts across Kazakhstan and Caspian Sea into Europe. And the third one is China, Central Asia, West Asia, which goes through Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and also go to Iran, and from Iran to Turkey into Mediterranean Sea. So 1, 2, 3. The 3 economic corridors are the most important for BRI. So you can see China really pays a high price for Russia-Ukrainian war because traditionally 90% of China's land-based trade was going through the China-Mongolia-Russia, so it's so-called China-Europe Express Railways. But now Chinese companies, European companies are now rerouting the routes to the routes south of the northern route. So that helps actually CAREC region's economic growth, right? That means trade, that means corridor, that means more connectivity in CAREC region. Sorry. So what CAREC mean for the European Union? So if you look at these red lines, so this is basically what Europeans are investing and helping the CAREC region to develop connectivity. So you can see the red routes starting from the Black Sea, right, especially through Georgia into Azerbaijan, Baku, then into Caspian Sea. And from Caspian Sea here, look, the Europeans rely on very much on the two ports. One is called Aktau, the other is called Kurik. In the west part of Kazakhstan, there are two ports that have been going through their port. So the two ports are now being upgraded with investments from Europe and also investments from other countries. I'm not sure whether they got some investments from China. I have no idea. But these two ports are extremely important for Europeans, for EU to connect with Central Asia. So here the red route goes into west part and central Kazakhstan. And here there are two subroutes. So one route goes through the north of Kazakhstan, Karaganda, Astana is further north, Astana, Karaganda, then finally to Dastik and into Urumqi. And the second subroute goes through Chimkent, then Almaty, then into Urumqi. So the EU pays the #1 priority to this route. So Chimkent, Almaty, Urumqi. So the EU has done feasibility study and they published this feasibility study in their website of the European Commission. Yeah, I think it's in their DG, I think it's DG Transport. So you can find it easily, you can download. That was newly published last year. And there's another route which goes through Turkmenistan, then go through Ashgabat, then into Uzbekistan, Bukhara, Samarkand, and Tashkent into Kyrgyzstan, from Kyrgyzstan into China. So you can see both these routes are very much connected with potential Chinese routes, existing Chinese route and potential Chinese routes, especially the China, Kyrgyzstan, and Uzbekistan railway. So China and the European Union have a lot of overlapping interests because China and European Union are the two biggest economies in Euro-Asian continent, and they have strong needs for connectivity, so to improve imports and exports. So you can see this CAREC region now having a renewed importance for the European Union. I just visited Brussels. I talked to people who are in charge of Central Asia. From DG Trade, I talked to the cabinet of President von der Leyen. And gosh, I can tell you that the EU is now giving tremendous importance to Central Asia. So basically, Central Asia have already signed partnership and a cooperation agreement with all the 5 Central Asian countries, and now they are upgrading it. I mean, when I worked as trade attaché in Brussels, I negotiated with Europeans for China-EU partnership and cooperation agreement, but utterly failed. Now EU signed. I mean, also I negotiated with the Europeans about China-EU bilateral investment treaty. Again, failed because because of Uyghur issue, right? The EU imposed global human rights sanctions on China, and China immediately retaliated. That killed China-EU bilateral investment treaty. But EU, Central Asia, now they are kind of entering into a very good moment of their relationships. So you can see CAREC region got blessings from the European Union. And this is Russia. CAREC region means for Russia. This is a pretty old map, 10 years ago, but you can still see Russia relies on this Caspian Sea to connect Russia with Iran and finally with India. Okay, there's another sea across the Pacific Ocean, starting from Russia, Siberia, Vladivostok, and finally into India. So for Russia, they also have strong economic interests and strategic interests linking the CAREC region. Okay, so what does this mean? So that means the CAREC region now having a new political, economic geography. Number one, CAREC region is now having a renewed strategic importance, not only for Central Asian countries themselves, but also for all the major economies and the great powers, including China, United States, European Union, India, and Turkey, right? And secondly, the new political economic geography of the CAREC region means landlocked is no longer a disadvantage. That completely change your mind, because landlocked traditionally is perceived as a terrible disadvantage for trade, a terrible disadvantage for robust economic growth. But listen, now in the new circumstances, landlocked is no longer a disadvantage. On contrary, being landlocked means you are the strategic backyard for those great powers. You are a strategic backyard for China, for Russia, for the United States, for the European Union, for India. So this strategic backyard position creates robust economic growth. And more than that, wars around the CAREC region are actually helping robust economic growth in this region. Remember, I said more remittances from Russia into Central Asian countries, trade rerouting, more digital trade connectivity, more investments from Russia, more investments from China, a huge amount of investments from the European Union, right? They pumps, I don't know how much, must be more than 10 billion euros for helping upgrading the ports, for building terminals, for soft infrastructure, right? And a lot of money from the United States. So wars or geopolitical tensions around the CAREC region are actually helping robust economic growth. So a new middle zone, the CAREC region is a new middle zone, is taking shape in the Euro-Asian continent. That makes the CAREC region a shelter from wars. So this is the political geography, a new political economic geography for the CAREC region. And the whole CAREC region is now being rediscovered by major economies and great and regional powers. So firstly, you have C5+1. So C5+1, initiated by Donald Trump, right, and Central Asian countries several years ago, I think back in 2018. So C5+1 means US plus 5 Central Asian countries. Then this C5+1 idea and the format has been copied by Russia, by European Union, by India, by China, right? Most recently, China held China Central Asia Summit, and a permanent secretariat was newly established this year in Xi'an, which prepare for deliverables for the summit, which will be held once every 2 years. And also we saw the new declaration, I think in Sashu, right, in Azerbaijan, by the members of the Organization of Turkic States. And also this year, last July, the Astana Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit was successfully held. So it's really being rediscovered by the major economies and great regional powers. But I have to let you know, everything is quite fluid. What is the geography of prosperity for CAREC? So that's the subject of my presentation. I think, number one, the geography of prosperity for CAREC needs to be a geography of peace for CAREC. So for the past 1.5 days, we talk a lot about connectivity, trade, inclusive development, green development. But don't forget, what's the development for, right? What's the air? What's the external environment for development? I think it's really for peace, right? And the peace is the air that can foster development. Without peace, you don't have any development, right? I mean, Afghanistan, right? If there was a war, how could you achieve development? And Afghanistan needs to go through the whole process, very sometimes painful process of peace reconstruction, right? So geography of prosperity for CAREC region, number one is geography of peace. And number two is geography of new developmentalism. You can call it anything. Geography of development, or geography of new dimensions of development, which includes green, innovative, and inclusive development, which is actually the subject of our conference. And also geography of new developmentalism means regional integration, connectivity, and access to the seas. So in terms of access to the seas, the CAREC region really needs 3 CAREC members which have the direct access to the seas. They are China, Pakistan, and Georgia. So these 3 CAREC members needs to play a special responsibility for helping other CAREC members to have access to the ports, to the seas. As I just mentioned, everything is fluid. The geopolitical situation in CAREC region is extremely fluid and, to be honest, unstable. So we need to bear that in mind. So the stability in the CAREC region is subject to many factors, including geopolitics, including religion-related issues. So what does that mean? It means we need a strong agency, ownership of the CAREC region to make sure that the CAREC region countries can strengthen the regional integration, to strengthen the connectivity, to have their own initiatives, and also need very resilient multi-vector diplomacy, right? We think about these wars around the CAREC region. So how you make sure that you're still a zone of peace, a zone of stability. So you have to practice diplomacy, right? Very smart diplomacy, not just hard power, but also soft power, smart power. So this university have a very strong department of political science and international relations. Hopefully, we can produce more prime ministers. We have already, KIMEP University produced the 2 prime ministers for Kazakhstan. We hope in the future we can produce more, right? Also, we produced ministers. So I hope that one day somebody from my class become prime minister, become minister, right? Not only for Kazakhstan, but also for other Central Asian countries. And the CAREC program will and must have a bigger role in safeguarding peace and promote development. So I think that's my contribution as a political scientist. So for me, CAREC region is of course, it's a purely economic program, but the spillover out of the CAREC program is not just economic, right? It is political. Political in the sense that CAREC program contributes to peace and stability. I think that's what development is for. And finally, I want to describe a rosy picture for the geography of prosperity of CAREC in 2050, right? But the precondition is that CAREC region needs to grow by 5% every year. I don't know whether you can achieve that or not. But for the past 10 years, it is achievable. Because some countries register 8% growth, others 6%. So on average, if Afghanistan can successfully reconstruct itself, if Pakistan's economy can continue to grow more than 5%, so the whole region can achieve, of course, China's economy needs to grow above 5%. I hope that China can deliver. I'm not quite optimistic. But let's say a rosy picture, growth by 5% every year. That means significant expansion economic scale. So that means CAREC economy will double every 14 years. That means significantly improved infrastructure and connectivity. Think about high-speed railways linking the whole CAREC region, right? Think about huge amount of infrastructure investments out of the 5% and average growth in CAREC region. That also means industrial and technological development. Equally important, geography of prosperity of CAREC region means social development and enhanced living standards. That means social inclusivity. Strengthened regional cooperation and much improved environmental and sustainability standards. I think I will stop here. I run out of my time about 40 minutes, and questions and comments are much welcomed. Thank you all.
Dr. Xiaotong, thank you so much for the really interesting, thought-provoking lecture. Indeed, lecture that covers our region, and I really anticipate maybe questions and comments, especially given that we have some time. Yeah, for about 20 minutes, please, colleagues. Yes, please do.
Okay, thank you so much for great presentation. So on one of the slides, you showed the middle corridor, Trans-Caspian corridor, right? And so we need more infrastructure investments in this corridor, but I think some people worry, like, what if the war will be over and then the importance of corridor will maybe not so important? So what do you think about the future of Trans-Caspian corridor?
I'm quite optimistic about the middle corridor, the Trans-Caspian corridor. I think that the Chinese and the Europeans have long planned for this, even before the war. So when I served as trade attaché in the in the Chinese mission to the European Union, I remember we have already talked about this. But at that time, I don't know what it's called, Trans-Caspian corridor, but basically the route was there. So then starting from, I don't know when, maybe starting from 2015, Chinese and Europeans have already thought about, actually they have already in 2015 established the so-called EU-China connectivity platform, which basically started to study and research for this Trans-Caspian corridor. So when President Tokayev announced this flagship initiative, immediately, I think that got support from the European Union. A little bit later, got support from China, and also got support from the United States. And I think also Russia supports that. So everybody supports that. So mid and long term, I'm pretty optimistic. But we have to bear in mind, this is really a new thing. And traditionally, China's energy was more put in the northern route, which cuts across Russia. So that means a lot of new investments from China, from European, from other countries. But China's economy is going through a deflationary phase. That means China's economy is getting more and more difficult. I don't know whether China can have more money for this Trans-Caspian corridor. And also, I think that European Union is not giving more money to this middle corridor. But also, I would say Russia, they give support, but they also focus a lot on the north-south direction. instead of east-west direction. So they probably are not 100% wholehearted for supporting this middle corridor. And don't forget, when we say middle corridor, it's not just an idea. It is hundreds of large, medium-sized or small-sized projects. You need a lot of expertise, a lot of international collaboration, not something staying in the blueprint. So I'm saying that to complete construction of this middle corridor, you need at least 10 years, if not more. And as I just mentioned, the geopolitical situation is quite fluid. There might be some scenario, for example, if Russia-Ukrainian war stopped after Trump becomes president, if the northern route is being safe again, right? If there are some new developments in geopolitics, in international politics, this middle corridor might lose attention from those great powers and major economies. But for the coming years, 2 or 3 years, it should be okay. So we need to hurry up to build this. But that requires, I'm talking about hundreds billions US dollars for building this. So theoretically, very promising. Practically, a lot of challenges, practical challenges.
Nice to hear somebody who's optimistic for a change. Everybody tends to be very gloomy these days. I have 2 questions, however. One is, a lot of the growth that you showed us in your first slide happened largely before these heightened tensions. I mean, the Israel-Gaza situation is 1 year old, war in Ukraine is 2 years old. Much of the growth happened before. So there doesn't seem to be a very strong causality between that growth and the heightened attention to the region, unless one would expect that already people expected that to happen beforehand. So that's my first question. My second question is, and that may be to you or perhaps to our CAREC colleagues as well, but what is the cost comparison between shipping? Because essentially we are talking about connecting China to the European market. There is not a lot of significant economic activity in the middle yet. So you're essentially talking as this being a bridge between the 2 areas. What is the cost comparison of shipping on a large container ship that can carry hundreds and hundreds of containers compared to actually using the land route in terms of shipment? I mean, is it really economically viable for large volumes that go from China to Europe or to Russia?
You're right. So basically, only 10% of China's global trade has been carried out through a land-based route, 90% going through sea. So I talked to some companies, some European companies, some Singaporean, some Chinese companies. Basically, they are using Central Asia as Plan B, as alternative route. So as long as their goods can be shipped through sea in an affordable way, they prefer sea routes. But a lot of Chinese companies, European and also Singaporean companies, they think about the rainy days. So they already started to move their regional companies here in Central Asia, in Almaty, for example. And I think that, take China as an example, China gave more and more importance to Sichuan province. It's southwest of China, and also Xinjiang. So, I mean, you probably remember Mao Zedong's time. So the third line construction, so move a lot of manufacturing from coastal city or central China to southwest, to Sichuan province. And now China is doing something similar. So moving a lot of manufacturing from Shanghai, from Yangtze River Delta to Sichuan, to Xinjiang. So Xinjiang is now become a hotbed of investments. So what does it mean? That means China is preparing for Plan B. So it's not in the immediate future. Let me make it very clear. But when we say 2, 3, 5 years, if there's a war, so you have to go through land-based route. Just imagine there's a war across Taiwan Strait. So Malacca Strait was cut off. China, US fought for control of Malacca Strait. So do you have other choices? You have to go through land-based line. So you have to go through CAREC region, right? Or maybe Russia, because China-Russia relationship, quasi-ally. Yeah. I'm sorry, I forgot your first question, but I think basically I answered your question, right?
Thank you. Dr. Hans, no, it was Dr. Hans first, yes? Yeah.
I also wanted to make more kind of a comment on the optimistic side, and I also enjoy, of course, the optimistic view. However, I'm also a bit reminding the more gloomy side of this thing. If we look at the more long term of the growth of the region, we have robust growth and resilient growth still now. Looking at the figures, some of the very high growth rate might be overstated, frankly, by the statistical offices. But it's resilient growth. It's still good growth. However, if you compare to the 15 years before 2015 and the last decade, 1.5 decades, we have significantly lower growth than we had in the region before. And it is partly related to not as much foreign investment like before. So we have a reflection of the more complicated economic and partially also political situation on the growth in the region. And as you mentioned, also the CAREC region to some extent was a gainer of the Russian-Ukraine war and some other wars, but this hopefully might not last forever. So we have fundamental, as we discussed the last few days, we have fundamental global technological economic changes, and we were talking about trade facilitation before and reduced trade cost, which is in one sense good and favors some sectors, but it's also you have import competition and it will affect other sectors. So I think to preserve the relatively high growth rate, it's not easy. And what we need is profound economic, maybe industrial, maybe also the services sector development, but we need profound development in the region. And this refers also a little bit to the middle corridor, what we discussed. Transit is fine, but own economic development is better. So again, we need to the middle corridor in some sense. It's important for the China European trade, but it might be even more important for the local trade in both directions of the CAREC region.
Yeah, I agree with what Hans just said. The picture is not rosy. Maybe the figures looks like they're quite promising. As I said, there might be some bubbles. So especially when the global economy is not in good shape, we're now in a very difficult, actually some kind of depression period. But that being said, I would just say we need more countercyclical initiatives, countercyclical projects. So when the world economy is going through the very difficult depression phase, we need something like middle corridor. It can serve as a countercyclical tool. That means if you put money now and make investments in infrastructure now, then after 10 years, when the world economy entering into new growth phase, you immediately benefit from that. Think about innovation. Usually most, if you look at the history of economy, most innovations, for example, the Jenny textile machine, IBM, electricity bubbles, they're all invented economic depression phase. But once global economy enter into growth, these inventions will immediately increase productivity across all the sectors. So I think that middle corridor is a countercyclical institutional invention. We need to cherish it and prepare for it, and starting from now, for the good days in 5 years or 10 years time.
Thank you. Gentlemen in glasses, yes, please.
Thank you, Dr. Zhang, for the very insightful lecture. So I have one question. What do you think the current situation or relationship between Central Asia countries and the United States, like economically and politically? Thank you.
I think number one priority for U.S. foreign policy for Central Asia is to ensure the independence of Central Asian countries. So for U.S. grand strategy, Central Asia is a buffer zone between the Indian Ocean, Pacific Ocean, and Russia. So to ensure the autonomy and independence of the Central Asia, and even the whole CAREC region, except China, the United States can ensure the status quo after the dissolution of the Soviet Union. So that means Central Asia is part of the US Indo-Pacific strategy. You see what I mean? So you have a buffer zone in Central Asia, you have Indo-Pacific strategy, Indian Ocean, linking Japan, Korea, India, and further away to Australia. You have large area of buffer zone. So Central Asia, geopolitically or even geostrategically, are important for the US, not to mention the energy sector. But I think that the Europeans are now playing a equally important role here. So I think that the EU and the United States, they can work together to ensure the region's independence and autonomy. So I think that's important for Central Asia. I haven't given serious thoughts to Mongolia or Georgia or Azerbaijan. I'm talking about 5 Central Asian countries, the C5, but probably Mongolia, Azerbaijan, Georgia are similar for the US strategic considerations. China is exception. China is a strategic rival for the US, and China's relationship with the EU are very difficult now, right?
Okay, gentlemen, please.
Yeah, Professor Zhang, it's excellent presentation. As a human capital specialist, not an economist, but trying to look at human capital, demographics, how they play an important role in productivity and economic growth and enhancing GDP. So after listening to the geography and prosperity of Central Asia and in specific to CAREC region, I was wondering whether CAREC region has the capacity, human capacity, to take over this kind of a real opportunity. That's the first question. The second question, does CAREC region focuses on building human capacity as well as looking at demographics, health parameters? Because I do feel that these are the very critical, and you have seen over the centuries, it is not the capital, it is not the investments, it's not the geopolitical, it is the human mind and the capacities of the human. So I'm looking at comparing some great examples of Europe, India, China. Does CAREC region has this ability, especially the Central Asian countries? Thank you.
Yeah, our region now is having a relatively good demographic bonus, especially countries like Uzbekistan. Their demographic situation is pretty good. 50% of their population are working force, and their total population has crossed the threshold of 37 million people. So I think Central Asia, I mean, Kazakhstan, the birth rate is more than 2.6, whereas in East Asia, in Korea, is 0.6, and China is a little bit above 1. So if you compare East Asia and Central Asia, here you have better demographic conditions. But that being said, the total population in the 5 Central Asian countries are pretty limited. It's about 80 million people. So that's why CAREC region in terms of demographics are more meaningful, because you have Pakistan. You have, in Pakistan, you have another 200 million, and which is still growing, relatively young. And you plus China, 1.4 billion. So CAREC region demographically are more meaningful than just C5 countries. And demographic extremely important for Central Asian countries, because I find that even in Kazakhstan, you're still lacking of workforce. You have also serious problem of brain drain. So young, especially male graduates, they move to the United States or Europe for their studies. And we don't have as many professors, full professors, associate professors here in Kazakhstan. So I think that's potentially a challenging for the robust and sustained economic growth for Central Asian countries. Thank you.
Thank you. Expect a series from us then. Okay. For KIMEP, if you need full professors. Okay, gentlemen, yeah, please.
I would just quickly like to supplement a question. This Central Asian region consists of 5 countries. They have their inner conflict as well. So when the money or the attention pours in from the other regional powers like China or Russia or US, they start to bury it, keep it under the rug. But when the attention of these international powers just fades away, their inner conflict chasms and opens up a lot. So what do you think about the political connections and interlinkages between among these 5 countries, and how it would play in the next 10 years?
Yeah, I think that Central Asia country, I mean, C5 is now going through a new phase. And the key player here is Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, especially Uzbekistan, because before 2016, Uzbekistan is relatively isolated. But after the new president, Mirziyoyev, came to office, 2016, Uzbekistan is now very much open and managed to establish the union treaties with neighboring countries, Kazakhstan, for example. So that really injects new dynamism to the C5 regional integration. I mean, C5 regional integration. So that changed the dynamics. And Uzbekistan is increasingly active. They have very excellent diplomacy. They manage their relationship with Afghanistan, with Pakistan, especially with Pakistan because of historical links, as we talked yesterday, and also religious link, both Muslim countries. And also that's be translated into more connectivity projects, the Trans-Afghanistan Railway, which also got the support from China, but only in paper, right, on the lip service. So I think this kind of internal dynamics, the agency within C5 gives more dynamism to C5 relationship with the international powers and the major economies. So I mean, if you look at the ASEAN, so when external powers negotiate with ASEAN, whether it's Japan or whether South Korea or China or the EU or the United States, they always emphasize one point. It is ASEAN in the driving seat. It is not big powers in the driving seat. ASEAN is in the central position. Similar case should be for C5 countries. For negotiating, for managing external relations, always make sure that you 5 first talk to each other, right? Then you are in the driving seat, you are in a central position. Then you play smart. Then everything should be fine when you negotiate with, and play smart. See? So, but as I said, Central Asia is not just C5, right? It has extension, which includes Pakistan, Azerbaijan, Georgia. Because C5 have no access to the sea. So that means my understanding of Central Asia is CAREC. So my understanding of Central Asia is not C5. My understanding is an extended, enlarged understanding of Central Asia, which exactly the 11 members. So what I mean in Central Asia is Central Asia means the countries that do not have direct access to the sea. That means Mongolia should be part of Central Asia. That means northwest part of China, Xinjiang should be part of Central Asia. Azerbaijan should be part of Central Asia. Okay, so you have already 5 plus 3 or 4. Then you need extension because without Pakistan, without Georgia, you do not have access to the sea. You need China also because otherwise you don't have access to the sea. So now we have a CAREC region. But the core of a CAREC region are exactly the countries that do not have direct access to the sea. And they are the core, they are the heartland of the CAREC region.
Okay, thank you. I can't help but to a little bit to comment if I understand correctly, especially at the beginning, the comment in opposition to Dr. Hans, not on your kind of optimistic, but more pessimistic or dramatic side of your presentation, especially at the beginning. There is a kind of dramatization which goes along in line with some kind of, as I read it somewhere, exotization of the region. You know, I remember some reports from 1990s when there was like all this collapse of Soviet Union and all these stans appeared and there were like predictions that something awful, terrible would happen. The third war would, because it's a stance, you know, and nobody knows what's going on there. And it was so much dramatization, okay? And just to refute that, first of all, these stance Central Asian countries, let alone other countries, never started after 1991 from scratches. Okay, by 1991, all former Soviet republics were among higher, human development index. Okay, with 100% literacy, with very developed urban infrastructure, social, cultural, you name it. Okay, so what I'm saying is that probably we again kind of repeating this all. You know, probably it's in the political science, it should be some kind of this part, okay, in your discipline that, oh, you know, there's a wars, something happening, you should benefit or something happens. And then there's a lot of probably generalization, okay? Like, yes, China has been growing for more than like 40 years now, right? 40 years, like, okay, so, I mean, if we take out China from our formula, then the picture may be different. Then with this general economic, average economic growth, unfortunately, you know, we have this phenomenon of growth without development. So even if this grows, hopefully, I mean, it's still good to have 5 or 8% annual economic growth and to have nothing. But unfortunately, as in the case of Kazakhstan or in so many other countries, we even haven't had something like in Latin America in 1980s, like a lost decade, especially after 2008 financial crisis. Okay, so what I'm saying probably it's a little bit again a little bit non-mainstream, but there are more, I would say, internal issues in each country. Okay, more troubles there than some kind of geopolitical kind of ground. These wars, I'm sorry to say that, but for the last probably 500 years there has been no there, right? Or at least for the last 6 years. There was Cold War, then there was other. I do not want to be either too optimistic. There was a local conflicts, especially Azerbaijan, Armenia, and then Tajikistan civil war. But even them, they were like comparatively local. Okay, with all human, you know, tragedy, but still not affecting very much the whole region. Okay, so maybe any comments, and we will finish with this problem.
Yeah, I think that's my optimism. I mean, I'm not sure whether I'm optimistic or pessimistic, but I just start from the figures and thanks to CAREC Institute. You guys gave me the figures, right? That's from your quarterly economic monitoring report. But it is indeed true that usually external observers tend to be more optimistic. Whereas if you live and go through all these internal dynamics, you tend to be more realistic, right? So that's why I probably are more too much optimism for the CAREC region or for Central Asia. But I think that you have a lot of things that you can be proud of yourself. Peace and economic growth. And young people, if you look at their faces, they are more and more confident, right? KIMEP students speak perfect English, and they travel abroad. They have they can accept democracy, for example, right? So I think this is the universal values that can be represented here at KIMEP University. So I see optimism from the young people, right? I'm so proud that I can be a professor at KIMEP University. Well, I don't know. I mean, this is really appreciate that. It's really given me a good opportunity to express my political science perspective and mingled with your economics perspective.
Okay, I wanted to finish, but yes, please, there is a Bahram. Yes.
Maybe last question. On your last slide, Professor Zhang, thank you very much. You predicted, so if the region has 5% economic growth annually, then the total GDP will double in 14 years. But if you predict the same things politically, because you said the economy has consequences for politics, but politically, if you put politics first, by 2040, the region Eurasia, politically, do you think it will become more Asian or European?
This is really a difficult question. I mean, this region, CAREC region. Oh gosh, this CAREC region, even Central Asia, for me, it's Eurasia, right? Central Asia is you are yourself. You sit across Asia and Europe, and part of Kazakhstan is in Europe, right? And you are in the middle. You are the corridor. You are the gateway. So it's very difficult to say you are just Asia or just Europe. I mean, Kazakhstan football team plays in the Europe League, right? And gosh, I don't know how to, and it's politically and geopolitically, it's, to be honest, it's dangerous if you want to define yourself as just Asian or just European. For example, Turkey is in such a situation. From Atatürk, he wants to join Europe, right? He changed people's clothes, changed the Turkic language alphabetic, right? But until today, Turkey is a member of the European Union, right? They're still outdoor. So I think that you are yourself. You are who you are. I mean, it's pretty tricky if you want to say you are more Asian or more European. I mean, look at people's faces here at KIMEP University. I mean, okay, they are Asian, they are European. I think they are both, right?
Okay, with this, I'm not a big football fan, so I don't know. I'm not sure how Kazakh team performing in this European League, but with my subjective opinion, I think this today's conference was more or less okay with the CAREC region. So let me again thank you. Thanks KIMEP University for providing all these great facilities. We know, Mariam, there has been a lot of work done. You know that, you experience it. If there was a paper and water and microphone work, it's because people behind this. The great team from CAREC Institute, Emma, Rose, Mariam from KIMEP University. These girls, they're just amazing. They did everything. You know, sometimes I would fell asleep and even not thinking what's going on like tomorrow or something, because I knew we have these great teams. Thank you for this. Xiaotong, thank you. And everybody, like less than 5 months ago, we have been thinking about this conference, and there was ideas that maybe we should take it like online. But then we were horrified. No way. We all traumatized after this pandemic, and sitting in front of. So we see that that was the best decision for this year to have this a conference and forum 2 days ago offline. So we really hope that you've been here and enjoying. And at the end of the day, it's all about people reconnecting you. Okay, it's about engaging, discussing, agreeing, disagreeing with each other, but coming up with new ideas. Thank you to everybody.